Hello, heathens, and welcome back to Spinning the Wheel podcast with me, your foggy and ephemeral host, Megan Angus. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you are an old witch, welcome back. Um, you know what we do here. This is a weekly audio ritual. I still don't have a proper introduction as I had before. Maybe we'll figure that out in this coming year. Who knows? But this is a weekly audio ritual that we engage in to look through the various lenses of space time and timekeeping systems that people past, present, and future utilize to orient themselves in the universe. AKA, we talk about astrology, we talk about holy days and festivals celebrated the past, the present. We talk about lunar phases, we talk about witchcraft, but we also talk about the science of what we're moving through and folklore and cultural tradition and what all of that stuff may have um, to help us today in the challenges that we face living on Earth in these times and in these places, with the beloved guidance of our ancestors and our guardians and our gods and goddesses, and our higher selves and our best selves. So, all of that with a lot of cussing. So, sorry about that, or not. And, definitely some biased takes. All right, that's enough of that. Um, if you are new or if you've been hanging out for a while and haven't fully committed, you can follow my work and support my work through Patreon. You can subscribe for as little as $1 if you just want to throw a tip in the tip jar, or folks that subscribe at higher levels get more information, notes from the podcasts, notes from classes, etc., etc. More to come. More to come. You can head to my website, meganangs.com. You can sign up for my irregular newsletter. Sorry to all of the people who have signed up for newsletters. I'm bad at it, but hopefully getting better. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have dozens of free classes up on YouTube. Again, if you love the work, throw a tip in my tip jar or support me somewhere. Appreciate it. I'm on Instagram for now, TikTok for now, who knows, whatever. But I'm also on Blue Sky if you're going for that. I'm on Blue Sky, Megan Angus Witch in all of the places. I also do tarot readings, astrology readings, magical consultations, etc., etc. You can sign up for all of that stuff. My books have officially reopened for patrons and new clients. Again, you can find all that information on my website. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you. We're gonna just kind of jump right into the stuff. I think that's everything that we need to talk about. So we're going to orient into the season. We're going to orient into the Sabbats. We're going to orient into some of the other like larger systems that we're sitting in. And then we're going to drill down into this week's moon, holy days of this week, the fixed stars that are working with us, as well as our astrology that is guiding and assisting us, hopefully, this week. All right, let's get into it. This is Imbolc season, new moon in Aquarius 2025, lunar week number 1. All right, this week is kicking off with a really beautiful new moon, and it is bringing into alignment a few of our different calendars that we get to work with throughout the year. That's pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and orient us first and foremost into winter. We are still in the heart of winter. We still have ostensibly about, 6 weeks to 2 months of winter left in front of us at this point. And in winter, when we are moving through the winter portion of the wheel, we are focusing on great big concepts like death and rebirth, and as we move into this second half of winter, clearing the garden. Of course, winter starts with winter solstice for us here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's summer solstice for folks in the Southern Hemisphere. Um, but for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, our solar deities in many of our spiritual systems, many of our magical systems, our solar deities have either died and been reborn, or they have gone on or may still be in the midst of an underworld journey where they descend into the dark underworld and then come back with, stuff, experiences. Um, or we may be seeing, especially if we're talking about solar goddesses, um, solar deities that are retreating, that are going to be alone, or they're isolating themselves, or otherwise like pulling away from people and Earth at large and kind of doing something private or doing something alone. And then hopefully in the future they're going to come back, they will approach us again. So we're seeing some kind of a diminishment, a retreat, a disappearing, an ending and restarting of, or a going down and a coming back up of solar energy, solar power. And we see that if we're watching the sun on the horizon rise and do its thing and set each day. For those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, the sun is very, very far south in the southern sky, and it is rising very far south on the eastern horizon. It's setting very far south on the western horizon. It's just not coming very far up into the sky. But every day from winter solstice forward, it gets higher and higher, and it creeps more and more northernly on the eastern and western horizon. Um, and that is that symbol of the sun going down, having its deep moment of lowness, and then coming back from it. So that death and rebirth energy. As we move into what is going to be the next portion of winter, Imbolc season, we begin to step into how I, think of it in my mind is clearing the garden. We are stepping into the garden of our lives, the garden of our community, the garden of the world at large. And we are looking at the damage that has happened over winter, literally and metaphorically. And we are beginning to plan what work needs to be done, what things maybe need to be broken down completely and completely revisioned. What things could potentially be repaired for the coming cycle, what could be repurposed for the coming cycle, what things do we want to try to repeat from last year, what things do we want to try that are new. That's a lot of the work that we're going to be doing in this second half of winter. So let's dive a little more deeply into that. The Sabbat that we pass through for the last 6 to 8 weeks of winter is Imbolc. And this is a Sabbat that is focused on ideas like purification, perseverance, renewal, and dreams. We, during Imbolc season, are clearing out the past, and we are opening ourselves to the void where we drift and then dream of potential futures. This drifting and dreaming, in my opinion, is exceptionally important to engage in during Imbolc season. The signs that are overseeing it for folks that work with astrology are Aquarius and then Pisces. And in Aquarius, we might be approaching it from a very abstract place, a very existential place. And maybe a place that is not so emotional, but is more oriented to the intellect. How does that help us? Because it keeps our minds very, very open to all of the possibilities, regardless of how we might feel about those possibilities. And then when we move into the Pisces portion of Imbolc, we get to bring in more of those emotions and more of the spiritual element of what we're trying to do, the compassionate element, the humanistic element, the healing element, the transcendental element. And the fun thing, the important thing, the necessary thing about dreams and dreaming is that stuff can happen in our dreams. Stuff can happen in dreaming, in the dreaming, that can't necessarily take place here on Earth physically, not necessarily in the same form. But it is a place where we get to explore the extremes of things and then come back and try to find a reasonable manifestation of that here on Earth. And the more out there our dreams and fantasies can get, potentially, the more amazing the stuff could be that we do here on Earth. All right. So there's a big emphasis for me at this time of year of allowing ourselves to step into the mind and really explore its palace, and step into the spirit and really explore its palace, and allow some of those visions to come forward. And in the meanwhile, while our minds are drifting through all of those places, our hands might be busy undoing the things that we've needed for winter and beginning to clear space and bring out the things that we're going to need for spring. Yes, already. Do you feel rushed? Because I certainly do. I know a lot of people don't like winter. For me, I'm like, no, it is not long enough. Let me sit in the dark. I want the foggy darkness, please. Don't leave me. Oh, it's a lot, but the wheel turns and the wheel turns. So we will get darkness again at some point. Let's hope. Okay. Some other words for you to focus on as we move through the next 6 to 8 weeks of Imbolc season, approaching, of course, spring equinox at March 20th, 21st. Ideas like midwifery, right? Certainly for living beings, but also the idea of assisting the birth of something, right? Helping those around you birth the things that they are trying to bring into the world. Birth, initiation, right? Stepping out of the death cycle and back and into the rebirth cycle of the solar process. Waking after sleep, which is a very, ephemeral, liminal space to drift in. The return of life and light, honoring ancestors and those who passed over the season. The last stages of winter work, purification, and purification in the sense of moving through this mythical process of death and rebirth, and coming back to the physical plane, as well as the literal purification of, again, going out to the garden, seeing what damages happened, seeing what winter has wrought, basically unearthed sometimes, right? Certainly appropriate for Earth right now, and what needs to be done about it. Renewal of home and body, honoring craftspeople and wisdom keepers, rededication to personal beliefs, and learning a new skill. I go into way, way more detail on all of these ideas in my Imbolc classes, which there are recordings from the last couple of years up on YouTube. Am I doing a recording this year? Maybe? Probably? Who knows? We'll all find out together. So that's us in Imbolc season. That's what's going on for us in Imbolc season. And, if you are a person who's working the wheel, that's where we are on the wheel. And those are the general ideas and the general concepts that we're going to be working through in our personal lives and in the world at large with our community, our friends and family, society at large for the next 6 to 8 weeks or so. Now I want to ground into a couple of the other pagan calendar systems that we can work with at this time of year. One system that I've been wanting to include in the calendar for a while now, and I've finally added it, is the Runic Half Moon or Half Month system. And I'm just learning about it. If you have great resources, please send them my way. I want to study more on this. But it is a approach to learning about working with the runes by orienting them to certain times of the year. So, in looking at that, I thought about what pieces of the wheel it connected to based on these modern suggestions. and what signs, what moons are we working with, and all of that good stuff. So running from approximately January 28th to February 11th, we can work with the rune Elwaz or Elhaz, Elhaz. And this connects to ideas like elk and optimism and sanctuary and protection. And that's it. That's literally all I have for you. What I love about this system is that it seems to be a deliberate framework, but the suggestions are very loose because the idea in working with runes is that, yes, there is a level of tradition to interpreting what the rune means, but the true meaning comes in the subjective experience you have meditating on the rune and how it reflects in your own life and the way that it gives you guidance and information about and assistance with what's happening, or illumination maybe is a better word to use here, on the events in your own life, literally down to like where you live and the food you eat and all of that stuff. So it's more about hanging out with the rune and then having a very personal, subjective experience with it. So there's that. But I am going to be including that information more often because it's doing stuff for me and I like it. So, all right. Another calendar that we have been working with for a while are the Celtic Tree Months. And this is also, as far as we know, a relatively modern adaptation of this idea around working with this series of woods, trees that have been thought to be very sacred to various magical groups. And so running from approximately January 21st to February 17th, we work with the rowan tree or the rowan bush. I am going to give you some information about this. I have a lot more information in the notes for patrons for this week's podcast. Rowan connects to the archetypal entity of the thinker. And you can just hang out with that for a minute, given its alignment with Aquarius, the fixed air sign that we are working with at this time of year. Rowan stands for the second letter of the Ogham tree alphabet. It is known by the Celts as Lush, but it's spelled Luis. This is also, I believe, let me check my notes. Yes, that's the Ogham letter as well, is Lush. And Rowan energy is associated with astral travel, connection, courage, personal power, and success. And let me say as an aside, I highly recommend pulling up images of the plants that we talk about, the signs that we talk about, the stones, the runes, letters, like pull that stuff up, find it out there on the internet and pull it up and meditate on these images for yourself. Like build your wheel book for yourself. But this tree and plant really assists us with a lot of this stuff, like astral travel, connection, courage, success, personal power. A charm carved into a bit of a rowan twig will protect the wearer from harm. And there are a variety of stories from the Norse folk and from Scottish folk. There's stories about how a rowan tree saved the life of Thor, the god of thunder. And so, yes, thunder does connect to rowan work as well in some ways. It also connects to working with the dead in some ways. Rowan energy is sharp thinking, visionary, original, and creative. And it is also associated with feminine energy and the sacred goddess. This tree is often found growing in mountainous regions and is sometimes referred to as the Lady of the Mountain. Its female connection is even deeper, as the tree's nickname is sometimes witchbane or witchwood, encouraging the belief that this wood acts as a protection against witches or perhaps a protection for witches. Hang out with the tree for a while and have some conversations and decide for yourself. It was once forbidden to cut them down in case of bad luck. And if items were harvested from them, they were only to be used for the means of ritual and nothing else. And, as we have talked about many, many times, leave no trace, right? And when we're going into the woods to harvest items for magical purposes, we do a one to four, right? For every four that we see, we only take one, and we always ask for permission before we do any harvesting. Even here too, and especially here with a tree that's as magical as this, that has such a crazy, amazing lineage as this. These same witches often favor this wood, using it in spell casting, protective charms, and amulets, and for the crafting of wands and dowsing tools. Dowsing tools, of course, usually utilized to find water, but sometimes they can also be charmed to find other things. It is believed that rowans seem to grow where they are needed most. Rowans produce creamy white flowers in spring and vivid red berries in the autumn. And so there is also something about this tree connecting us to different portions of the wheel, right? It has a winter piece, it has a spring piece, and it also has a fall, maybe late summer or early fall piece. The bright red berries are also a sign of protection. The Celts thought that the rowan berries possessed magical powers. And finally, the rowan moon, the full moon / new moon that happens during, I guess both, during the Celtic Tree Month of Rowan, is associated with Brigid or Brigid, the Celtic goddess of hearth and home, who of course is honored intensely February 1st and February 2nd during Imbolc season. So there's a little bit about our Celtic tree work that we are doing. There's like I said, a lot more information about working with Rowan at this time of year and various ways that it can help you, as well as like crystals and planets and magical workings that we can do with that planet, or excuse me, with that tree. Okay, so now, after all of that, let's actually get into the moon of this week, kicking off Imbolc season, kicking off the year of the snake, kicking off our lunar week count. Oh yeah, I never did do the intro. I guess I'll do that now. And I'll record it, and I'll slip it in, and it'll be amazing, because that's how robots work. Okay. Maybe we'll talk about the year of the snake first, and then we'll get into the moon of this week. We're all going to find out together in just a second. Okay, year of the snake it is, and then we will get into... Look, I'm a trained professional, okay? I'm guiding us through... This is all... Okay, it's locked in, all right? Just, you take care of yourself, all right? New moon in Aquarius kicks off year of the snake for us here in 2025. Countries that use calendars based on the traditional Chinese lunisolar calendar, that's moon plus sun, celebrate New Year's on the first day of the second new moon after winter solstice. And that's how you can calculate this out every year. Stay hydrated, people. There are a variety of other calendar systems out there that do something very, very similar. We will talk about all, probably, of them at some point in the next year. because there's no adults here to stop me, is why. So this is commonly referred to as Chinese New Year. Lunar New Year is also becoming a very popular title for this holiday. And the holiday has different names in different countries. It's the Spring Festival in China. It's Tet in Vietnam. It's Losar in Tibet, Nepal, and Bhutan, etc., etc. And every year, we switch to a new animal. There's 12 animals in all. And even within that, there is a 60-year cycle where these animals move through 5 different elements. That stuff is outside of the scope of what we have time to talk about here on Ye Old Podcast. But suffice to say, This is the year of the snake, and more specifically, the wood snake. Um, Snake people are born in 2025, 2013, 2001, 1989, 1977, 1965, 1953. I know there's some old farts out there that listen to me. 1941 or 1929. That was a fine year, right? Nothing major happened. It's fine. All of these years, nothing major happened in any of them, right? More or less, right? And here's the thing, because as we can see, this is happening, around the end of January, beginning of February for us here in 2025. It usually is. It's going to be the second new moon after winter solstice. So we're going to have at least a month's time, right? Um, so if you were born in January or February, you need to find out if you were born before or after the new moon to find out which year you would actually be in. But otherwise, those years, if you were born in one of those years, this is the year of the snake for you. This is a snake return, as it were. Snake years encourage transformation, introspection, intuition, and a wisdom-based approach to life and work. Think about all of the different places where we see serpent symbolism in myth, in religion, in cultural symbolism. Snakes are connected to knowledge, they're connected to healing, they're connected to deception in some places, they are connected to knowing, right? The opposite of deception, the actual truth, etc., etc., right? Snakes are known to shed their skin. They are known for their serpentine, right? Serpents and snakes, they're known for their serpentine movements. And so all of that metaphor may come to bear for us in one way or another this year as we work within this energy. Wood snake energy specifically emphasizes creativity, growth, and flexibility. Learning from the past may be really important for us this year. And that's also something that I think about in the way that serpents move is because of their sideways motion, they really can kind of look backwards at the moves that they've made or that they're still making, as they make their forward progress. So wood energy, specifically with serpents, enhances adaptation, nurturing, and softening. Snakes feature prominently in many healing myths from around the planet. And this is a great year to consider what of yourself you have outgrown and are in need of shedding. Because of all of the personal skin shedding, quote unquote, right? Bending that might be called for, twisting even that might be called for this year. I encourage folks to check out mindfulness practices to support your mental health. Not a doctor, but as well as movement that supports balance, and any practices that strengthen the immune systems of all kinds. Not a doctor, but the serpent energy being connected to healing is pretty straightforward there. Obviously, listen to your trusted health advisors, as we say every week on the podcast, but for folks that want to celebrate Lunar New Year, celebrations marked with a number of traditions, reunion dinners with friends and family, any kind of get-togethers are very auspicious. Ancestor worship, thoroughly cleaning your house to sweep out bad luck, decorating your doors and windows with red paper cuts or the color bright red, lighting firecrackers, attending fireworks displays. It just happened, and my guess is that in some cities around the country, there were parties in the middle of the week when we actually had the new moon. But my guess is that this weekend you will find lots of folks who are partying. Lots of towns and cities often will move the celebrations to the weekend that's the closest right after. Fireworks displays, etc., etc. And giving and receiving money in red envelopes is also really, really lucky. Yes, giving money to others is a luck inducing ritual that you can engage in, a luck inducing spell that you can engage in, where you are basically saying to yourself and the universe, I know so much good shit's coming my way. It's cool for me to share what I have now. Folks will go to the banks and they will get bundles of brand new, completely unused dollar bills, and they will fold those up very crisp and neat into their red envelopes and pass those out to friends, families, neighbors, coworkers, etc. I realize times are tight for some folks. If you can't participate in that, share whatever abundance you have in other ways, because again, it's opening the door for more good stuff to come in. I also have some other traditions for snake years, suggestions for colors, and some of the feng shui and like movement stuff that you might do up for patrons in the notes, as previously mentioned. Okay, now we're actually going to get into that other stuff that I talking about 10 minutes ago. We're going to do that now. All right. All right, let us get into this new moon that we have been dancing around for quite some time. Okay. Wednesday, January 29th at 4:35 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day for everybody else around the planet, we have a pretty cool, actually, new moon at 9 degrees, give or take, of Aquarius. So let us really ground into and kind of center ourselves into what we're doing here, because this new moon is a big kickoff. You're probably also thinking to yourself, why didn't you put out the podcast earlier? Because I was doing it. I was doing the witchcraft. Sorry. But also because for me, and if you've worked with me before, you've heard me say this. Many of our holy days that we work with, many of these festivals, these astrological / astronomical events that we work with, some of them are very precise, and you do want to be right on time with it. But for me, some of them ring like a bell. They reverberate, and I feel like we have a piece of time, a chunk of time, that we can go ahead and step into engaging the energy at whatever level makes sense for us, in whatever order makes sense for us, etc., etc. So I'm not stressing on it too much, but here we go. Right. Here it is now. So this moon, 9 degrees of Aquarius. It is under the rulership of either or both Saturn, hanging out in Pisces, or Uranus, who has been hanging out in Taurus for quite some time. Both of these planets are going to be scooching into the next signs and then scooching back and then recommitting in 2026. So, there's stuff going on with Saturn, there's stuff going on with Uranus. But if we're thinking about who has a lot of influence over this moon, one of the influencing factors are the ruling planets, Saturn in Pisces, Uranus in Taurus. This is our first sorta official sorta new moon in Aquarius with Pluto in Aquarius. Why sorta? Because it's not actually the first one. We've had at least one, if not two, in the last couple of years. I know that we had one last year for sure. But that was while Pluto was still dancing back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn. Pluto has fully committed itself to Aquarius for the next 20 years. Side note, fixed sign placements, RIP. 07, I think is what the kids say. It's only 20 years. I'm sure it's not going to be a big deal. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, everybody. Everybody calm down. It's going to be fine. And I'm talking about all the fixed sign placements, okay? I'm not just talking about the big three, all right? No one gets out of this alive. RIP. It's gonna be great. That's gonna be great. All right. If you look under your chairs, you'll find the party favors and the little thing. It's gonna be super fun. All right. Um. So moving directly back into this new moon in Aquarius, what are we doing with it? We know that Saturn and Uranus are kind of hanging out off to the side, muttering about whatever's going on. Um. But first and foremost, it's a new moon, right? And all of our new moons are the point in our lunar process where we get to initiate, we get to seed, we get to start, we get to plant, we get to instigate, open up, right? Begin the thing, whatever it is. And this is Aquarius. And Aquarius is the sign that describes parts of us that are future oriented, progressive, humanistic, the portions of us that are inventive and creative and weird, the portions of us that are bohemian and radical and revolutionary and countercultured, but also the parts of us that are dedicated to the action of destabilization, the parts of us that are erratic, the parts of us that sometimes want to over intellectualize things as a means of not committing to things. All of us have Aquarius in our chart somewhere. So this describes some portion of the way that we function in the world. And this new moon is hanging out with that and giving us an opportunity to start a new conversation, start a new process, or come back around to some work that maybe we have not engaged in a long time. A piece of ourselves, a piece of our connection to the world, whatever it is. Aquarius work can be very abstract. It can be very existential. A lot of that stuff that I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast with our Imbolc energy, right? It's abstract. It's very intellect based, very existential, very philosophical, but not necessarily too emotional. And there's pros and cons to that, right? There's pitfalls to not being emotionally sensitive to yourself or the situation around you. And there is an advantage sometimes to having that distance between our feelings and whatever is happening to us or around us, or the things that we're thinking or whatever. So this is a time period where we get to initiate that stuff. It is fixed, which means that it is wanting to stabilize, even though Aquarius energy is also about destabilization. It wants to sustain, even though it is about the future. It wants to find a way to make the weird, the futuristic, the new, the unusual, the radical something more permanent, rather than just a trend or a flash in the pan. The transpersonal. And where we might see this play out in our lives is within our friend groups, or groups that we participate in, movements in society that we participate in that are revolutionary, that are communal, that are progressive, and that are group oriented. Pack a lunch and get cozy, because you're going to be hearing this collection of words for the next 20 years when folks talk about Pluto, Pluto in your chart, Pluto in the skies, Pluto this, Pluto that. They're going to be utilizing words like this, vocabulary like this, to describe this portion of our life, the work that we might be doing here, this portion of our sense of self, whatever it is. So I say that partly to kind of like prepare yourself, because you're going to hear this over and over again, but also to say you got 20 years to explore these ideas. You've got 20 years to really dig in on what do these words mean for you. How do you see these words play out in your personal life, in the world at large? What are your connection to these words and these ideas and these states of being? Because it's here now. It's here. The work is here to be done. So that's us on a new moon. That's us hanging out in Aquarius. A lot of the work that I focus on when I'm hanging out with our new moon in Aquarius is, what have we inherited and what are we carrying forward? And I talk about this in the Wheel of the Year books. Um, this is a moment for us to really think about how we are, a metaphor that I like to use as a link in a chain, or a massive tapestry that is in front of me, and I am in charge or responsible for working on this tiny little piece of the tapestry that's in front of me. And my thread goes off into the distance in both directions, where it's coming from and where it's going to. And all I'm really in charge of are the few stitches in front of me, but it's with a thread that is continuous. And so in Aquarius season for me, it really is about thinking about what are the traditions that I've been handed, what are the customs I've been handed, what are the beliefs I've been handed, what are the philosophies that I have been handed by my family, by the society that I live in, by the traditions or the belief systems that I've chosen to participate in, whatever, right? All of these collections of people have traditions. They have their histories. They have their stuff that is sort of set in stone. What of that stuff have I been handed? And what of that stuff am I going to choose to continue to carry forward? That is a big part of the work for me at this time of year. Because it is my choice as one tiny individual in this massive system of humans doing things. If I choose to never say that thing again, I'm one place where that tradition dies out, where that belief stops. If I choose to bring it back up and resurrect it again and again take it out for the wheel one more time, there's one more year that it exists in the universe. And you could see where not being too emotional about that could be really helpful, right? Oh, my grandpa taught me that, racism is fine. That's okay. Well, hey, we've got some love for grandpa, but grandpa might have been extremely wrong about some things, right? Might have been extremely wrong about some things. And me, as the descendant of grandpa, whomsoever that person may be, it's my choice, and it's, I would dare say, my responsibility to examine that and think about it and have a real conversation with myself about what am I carrying forward? What do these traditions need to die? And what do these traditions need to be carried forward? So that stuff. When we look at the chart of this moon, which will be up for patrons, we see that the moon and the sun, obviously it's a new moon, so they're hanging out together at 9 degrees of Aquarius. We have Mercury at 2 degrees of Aquarius, and we have Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius. So while it is wide, yes, they are conjunct. And then across the chart, hanging out over in Gemini, another air sign, we have Jupiter, who has stationed retrogrades, traveling retrograde at 11 degrees of Gemini, trining this whole collection over here. I think this is pretty damn cool, actually. For reasons, Jupiter and Aquarius get along with each other. There's vibes there. They're eyeing each other from across the room. There's that whole like little wink wink, you want to go outside and have a smoke kind of a moment, right? The new moon hanging out with Mercury in Aquarius, I think, really assists with the intellectualizing portion of the event and the adventure. It's very much here to help us verbalize what's happening, intellectualize what's happening, but also just simply to think through our thoughts. This is a great chunk of time around this new moon for doing some journaling, in my opinion, for writing down our wishes, writing down our goals, and keep it long term. Keep it sketchy. Keep it broad and open ended. Don't fill in all the blanks on the thing yet, because from where we are on the wheel, we absolutely cannot see all of the things that are coming towards us, good, bad, difficult, easy, and otherwise. We cannot see it all. So we don't want to complete every last bit on the list because we don't know yet. But we can have some broad strokes. This is a great time for broad stroke type journaling of like, here's in general the direction I would like my year to go in. And Jupiter trining this whole mess, even though it is retrograde, it is retrograde in the sign of Gemini. We talked about this a bit last year. One of the opinions out there is that when a planet is retrograde in a sign of its detriment, the not so great portions of the retrograde may be muted a little bit. Jupiter doesn't like hanging out in Gemini, doesn't have a good time there. It's too much spreadsheet, not enough arguing at a coffee house. You know what? You get me on the vibes with that one, right? It's too much. Just give me the facts. It's not enough of let's hypothesize and have a what if session for the next 4 hours. So Jupiter doesn't have a great time. It's like too busy acquiring data. It's too caught up in the details sometimes. But while it is retrograde in the sign of Gemini, that may actually be dialed back a little bit. That may be toned down a little bit. So I think we're also getting some benevolent help from Jupiter trining this new moon, in the sense of like, yes, I can be philosophical. I can be expansive in my thinking. I can stay optimistic and hopeful as well about what's going on. Even if I can't nail down the finite details of the thing, maybe I shouldn't be nailing down the finite details right now. Maybe I should just be open to the possibility that shit is going to be good, or I'm going to make it good, or we're going to make it good. Let's just think from that space. I think it's very cool. I know I'm not talking about Pluto because Pluto at 1 degree is like, schmumping in the darkness behind everybody. Like, I'll be the final purveyor of goodness. Like, relax, Pluto. Calm down. But if anything, Pluto does lend an element of gravitas to whatever situation it's in the mix of. It can make things feel a little more potent. And so, humming in the background, or rumbling perhaps in the background of all of this astrology, is Pluto saying, these simple conversations, these philosophical jaunts, these, hypothetical meanderings in our thinking and our conversations with people, there is something quietly very potent about the people talking to each other and discussing a more hopeful future than the fucking corporate overlords have planned for us. You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. That is how I'm choosing to see this new moon. Not as a new moon where all of a sudden everything makes sense, and all of a sudden here's the blueprint, here's how we go forward into a happy and healthy future. This is one of many new moons that we are going to be given over the next 2 decades, where there is a quiet rumbling underground of, even in the simplest, most casual, friendly conversations between 2 strangers on a bus, 2 strangers on the subway, there is a sense of they can't stop us. The future is coming, and it's a bright and hopeful future, whether they want that or not. Goodness will prevail. Okay, look. And it might be some of the most sinister amongst us that lock it in and make that possible. All right. So bringing it back around, what we have inherited and what we're carrying forward. As we dream about what we're going to become in spring, we want to consider how our star shine illuminates those around us. Remember, all those stars in the sky are suns, even though the light may seem dim from here. And what I'm saying with that is, even though you might be sitting across from somebody on the subway or on the bus and they've got a grumpy look on their face, they are a sun, they are a star, just as you are a star, and they may seem dim in this moment, but they may be brilliant, and they may be illuminating the people around them in ways that in this moment. We can't see yet, but this is a moment almost of trust, of knowing that the stars within all of us are shining and may be shining brighter and brighter as time goes along. All right, I'm going to leave you with that for the new moon work. uh, hang out with those thoughts, journal on those things. I highly encourage. For our lunar body work and our plant body work, and I say this every week for the podcast, not a doctor of the human corpus, a doctor of space and time. So check in with your trusted health advisor before you utilize any of the information in this podcast. Don't sue me. Slash, I always encourage working with the metaphor. So if there is another way that this information rings true for you, go with that. Listen to your intuition, O most gentle of heathens. Okay. For our lunar body work that we are doing on a new moon in Aquarius, we are activating, adorning, awakening, stimulating, or otherwise preparing for action the legs, especially the knees and the ankles. So whatever makes sense for you, however that makes sense for you. And for our plant body work, first of all, it's a new moon, so if you haven't spun your plants in a while, spin them a quarter of a turn to encourage fuller growth in all directions. If it's possible to spin your plant, do so. Sunwise, diasyl, so spinning it to the right, spinning it in the direction that the sun moves across the sky. This is also a great time for cultivating or harvesting for drying and storage in general. That would be any of your winter crops that are happening right around now. This is a great moon for pest control, disease control, because already the weather is starting to change outside, and you're going to start to see the effects of that on your plants, so pay attention. Plowing and weeding above ground, as well as grafting, layering, taking cuttings from things. Great time for this. As well as planting any of your annual crops that bear their fruits, especially leaves, above ground, especially the leafy crops. Seems to always be true for the air signs. Planting leafy crops, big deal. Also, potentially, if it makes sense for your weather zone and your garden cycle, planting cereals, grains, melons, cucumbers, celery, cabbage, spinach, etc. Obviously, the stuff that, depending on where you are on the planet, that might not be possible at all, or it might actually already be kind of warming up for you wherever you are. Okay, so that is our new moon stuff. That's our new moon astrology. So now I want to move into talking about the fixed stars that are guiding us overhead this week. And then we are going to get into the astrology of this week and discuss a few of the other major folk holidays that are happening for us this week. Alrighty, let's get into these fixed stars. So, the astronomy versus the astrology on fixed stars can get a little confusing. I get confused sometimes. What I am looking at when I say, hey, let's work with these fixed stars this week, what I'm looking at are dates that are approximate. They are approximate because the sighting, the ability to physically see a fixed star in the sky is dictated by where you are on the planet. That's the easiest way to say it. It is about your latitude, but it is also about your altitude. Is that right? Is it longitude? Longitude. Latitude. It's about the latitude and it's about the altitude. So it's literally about how close you are to one pole or the other will dictate when you see a fixed star, as well as how high up are you? Are you in a valley? Are you on a plateau? Are you at the tippy top of a mountain? These also will affect when you will physically be able to see a fixed star. We talk about here on the podcast the heliacal or helical, it's pronounced both ways, the heliacal rising of a fixed star, What that is a tradition of sighting fixed stars that has been utilized for thousands of years in astrology and astronomy. And what it means is that the fixed star is rising on the eastern horizon an hour to 3 hours, give or take, before the sun. And the idea, the optical effect, as you are looking out toward the eastern horizon, watching this happening, is that the fixed star rises seemingly in the glow of the rising sun. So you can still see the star. It's not blotted out by the brilliance of the sun, but the glow of the sun is nearby, and it's illuminating, or seems to illuminate, the same portion of the sky. There's so much thinking astrologically around fixed stars and why they're important and what they do and how to work with them, well beyond the scope of this podcast, dearest of witches. But I absolutely encourage doing your research around them. Your mileage may vary. It does pretty quickly, for some of the fixed stars, turn into a horrifying conspiracy theory rabbit hole. So have your tin hat on standby. Double check your sources. There's that stuff, right? But there are a lot of good websites out there that have a foundational piece of information about the majority of the fixed stars that people have been working with for, millennia. It's cool stuff, is the TLDR. And I have found them to be very elucidating, to the point of freaking myself out a variety of times. So also, don't get high on your own supply. There's that too. But this week, the heliacal stars that we are hanging out with are from Aquarius and Capricorn. But Megan, we're already in Aquarius. How could it possibly be? Again, astronomy versus astrology. What I am working with is, 1, an approximate date, 2, connected to the sidereal, or the astronomical rising of that thing. If you are, I don't want to go into all of this, but I always do. If you are an astrology student in the West, you are probably working with tropical astrology. You might be working with sidereal. The difference there is almost a whole sign's difference between where the sun actually appears to be in the sky versus the astro sign that we are working with here on Earth. There's a little bit of overlap, whatever. I work with the sidereal markings for reasons. Hit me up if you want to know more details, because boy, do I have them. But again, we don't have time here in the podcast. It just makes sense, so I do it. I got yelled at by the gods. That's probably the easy. I should just say that from now on. That's why they yelled at me, and I do it this way now. Okay, moving on. Here are our fixed stars that we are working with this week. On February the 1st, so right in alignment with Imbolc, basically, more or less in alignment with our new moon. Not quite, but close. We work with the heliacal rising of the fixed star Albali. This is found in the sign of Aquarius. Many astronomical and astrological systems mark this as the quote-unquote first star of Aquarius. It is found in the left hand of Aquarius. And the translated name of this star is, and I'm going to say, before I say it, Relax, okay? The translated name of this fixed star is the good fortune of the swallower. Okay, did you get that out of your system? Okay. But where does this name come from? So in theory, what a lot of the sources say is that the name comes from the light of this star swallowing the light of other nearby stars, because it's fairly bright. But I see it as a potential connection to the swallowing fish in Pisces. So there is a relationship between the constellation of Aquarius and the constellation of Pisces. We are going to talk about this in more detail as we move through Imbolc season and as we move through the stars of these two constellations. But the image of Aquarius is water pouring out of a jug. Sometimes there's a person holding it, sometimes it's just a jug hovering in midair, whatever, but it's this water pouring out. The water pours out into the mouth of one of the fishes in Pisces. So I have a different interpretation of what this star could mean. That's me, and I'm not saying that I'm right. That's just where my brain goes. That's all we're going to say about it for now. But there's something I think about this star that indicates a pouring out of goodness and a suggestion of trying to receive that goodness further into our process. Okay. As I said, we will explore this idea as we move through Imbolc season. The Coptic name, the Coptic Egyptian name for this star is the Discoverer, or the napkin or the towel in hand. But it is also seen as a bunch of grain stalks in hand. And that's interesting because while technically directly across the wheel would be Leo, kind of across the wheel is Virgo. And we know that that constellation is also witnessed as holding grains in hand. But maybe there's a connection here in terms of like, this is where that seed starts. This is the other end of that process, right? And here is where the pouring out, for the grains that we're ultimately going to be harvesting. Maybe I'm just going way too far with this. Maybe I've gone too far. All right, I'm going to pull back. All right. Also on February 1st, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Armus. This is found in Capricorn because, of course, the constellations kind of overlap in some ways. And this star is thought to be either the heart of the goat or the shoulder of the goat. The energy that comes along with this fixed star is the idea of shouldering the burden or shouldering a burden of some kind. Fits in with a lot of the other imagery that we're working with for Aquarius, for Capricorn, for winter, for Imbolc, etc. And then on February 3rd, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Dorsum. This is also found in Capricorn, and this is connected literally to the idea of a dorsal fin. And so this is thought to be either the back of the goat, the back of Capricorn, or specifically a fin on the back of Capricorn. And again, that's about all of the information that I've grabbed for those fixed stars. But lean in on the metaphors if they make sense for you. Like, there's something there about the dorsal fin, right, that could connect to steering or maneuvering through situations, or how a dorsal fin on a shark is a warning, but on a dolphin it could be like a, hey, the dolphins are here to party. I don't know. I'm just saying. But those are the fixed stars that are here to help us this week. Something about shouldering the burden, something about potentially receiving the goodness or the seeds of things that are going to pour out later. Something. Okay. Now, let us move into the astrology of the week and the holy days that we are going to focus on for this week. Alrighty, my friends. So let us get into the astrology and the holy days of this lunar week. Obviously, we are kicking off with a new moon in Aquarius at 9 degrees. We talked about that. I'm not going to talk about it more. And I am, however, going to get all of my notes out of my own way so that I can... Again, paid professional. I know what I'm doing. Thank you very much. All right. We've talked about that moon. Again, the chart for that moon, extra notes and stuff up for patrons. January the 29th, I'm not going to list off all of the holidays that we have this week. Those are also going to be in the notes for patrons. We are going to focus on a collection of holidays that are all kind of the same holidays, so we'll get into it here in just a second. Thursday, January the 30th, um, the astrology of note for this day, Uranus stations direct. That is one of the things that I think is very interesting on this day. Uranus stationing direct at 23 degrees of Taurus. It has been retrograde for, I don't know, like 5 months or so. Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune all spend about half of the year retrograde and half of it going forward. Which is part of why they take so frickin' long to make their way through a sign. Um, it's an outer planet. This may or may not have anything to do with your personal life. It might just be things that we see in the world. Um, but Uranus's movements through Taurus have all indicated pretty interesting financial stuff going on. Oh, wait, didn't the tech industry lose $1 trillion in a single day? I'm sure it's just a coincidence. All right. Uh, is Uranus a planet that refers to the cutting edge of technology and AI sometimes? Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Again, sure, it's just a coincidence. What else is happening on this day? We have the Sun trining Jupiter, whomst is also retrograde at the moment at 11 degrees of Gemini. Um, these trines between the Sun and Jupiter always happen right around the time that Jupiter is going to change direction. So we will get a trine right before or after the start of a retrograde and right before or after the end of the retrograde cycle. And it's a very cool, I think, little auspicious, like, signal moment kind of a gig. Sun trine Jupiter, always a good time. Always lovely, always a good time. Doesn't matter that it's retrograde, doesn't matter. This is, I think, a great day for making a wish, buying a lottery ticket if you can afford to do that. Otherwise, like, putting your petition out into the universe and being like, throw a penny in a well. It's that kind of a vibe. Also a great day for just hanging out with your loved ones, hanging out with people that you enjoy the presence of and want to party with. The vibes from that will last a day or two, so enjoy. Um, yeah, that's it. That's all I got for January 30th. January 31st, Friday, nothing. No astrology. February the 1st, Saturday, February the 1st. This is officially the start of Imbolc. Imbolc can be celebrated on the 1st and or the 2nd, one or the other or both. And if you do both, you might think of it as starting on the evening of the 1st and going into the day of the 2nd. Yes, it is in alignment with Groundhog's Day. No, that is not a coincidence. Yes, I have a piece about that information up on my website. You can go read more there. And it's a very nicely written piece on my website, if I do say so myself. So thank you very much. What do we have happening on this day? Imbolc, obviously. We talked a lot about Imbolc at the beginning of the podcast. I have classes about Imbolc, 2-hour classes up on my YouTube channel for free. So go check that out. Go get you some information about what we're doing in Imbolc season to really dial it in. And our astrology for this day, we have a couple of interesting things happening. One, we have Venus conjunct Neptune in Pisces at 27 degrees, and then, just a few hours later, Venus is conjunct the North Node in Pisces at 28 degrees. So basically all three points hanging out in the sky, the North Node, Neptune, and Venus. And this isn't the very first thing that's happened to the North Node, but it's kind of the first cool thing that's happened for the North Node since it moved backwards into Pisces. This is, I think, a very auspicious moment. I think that this is really auspicious astrology. Again, we have, just a day before, 2 days before, we have the Sun trine Jupiter, which is, TLDR, basically a really nice high five from the universe that's like, you got this, homie. Go for it. And then right on the heels of that, we have this conjunction between Venus and Neptune and the North Node. Venus is our capacity to draw the things to us that we find beautiful, that we value, that we appreciate, the people, the places, the things, the experiences. Neptune represents those parts of us that yearn for transcendence and communion with our fellow humans and healing and spiritual fulfillment, spiritual happiness and bliss. And the North Node is a big representation of the things that we're hungry for our destiny. The things that we feel are fated for us, or in the ways that we might be chosen by the gods for something. And that is a really interesting alignment. If nothing else, this is a fantastic day for throwing your fish hook into the cosmic sea and seeing what you catch. Making wishes, again, throwing pennies into wells, buying lottery tickets, all of that good stuff. It is a great day for doing something really wonderful for yourself, doing something really wonderful for the people that you love. The only difficult part that can come up for us when we're having these kinds of really intense Neptune transits is that we can let go of the body a little bit and forget to take care of the body. So you might need to set a little reminder for yourself, drink some water, have some snacks on hand. Don't bliss out so hard that you your blood sugar drops. Like, stay with us, stay with us. But it is a beautiful day for enjoying beautiful things and just feeling a little bit of bliss, which we could all use a little bit of. It is a really great day for dreaming about the futures that are coming, the wonderful, amazing, brilliant, healing, collective futures that are coming. Just that, just a little witchcraft of that sort, and all of that good stuff. As I said, the majority of the holy days for this week I'm leaving in the notes, but one of the things, as I mentioned, Imbolc on this day from our Celtic friends and ancestors, we have Imbolc, which is another name for Imbolc and has its own very specific elements. Again, there's more details on that in the Imbolc classes that I have up on YouTube. Also on this day, we see from our Celtic Christian friends and ancestors, the Feast of Saint Brigid. From our Candomblé friends and ancestors, the Yemoyá festival is happening in Brazil. Side note to that, there are Yemoyá festivals all over the world that happen throughout the calendar year that reflect the diaspora that African folks experienced as they were shuttled around the world for corporate interests. And, we don't need to go into all of that, but we know what the fucking deal is. And so Yemoyá festivals happen around the planet at different times throughout the year based on the diaspora that those people experienced in that region of the world, which is also just, it's terrible, but it's really cool at the same time. The resilience of the human spirit. It's like, no, this is my goddess. You're not taking that from me, sucker. It's not happening. February 2nd, no astrology of note. Candlemas / Candelaria / Imbolc continues. And yes, lots and lots of crossover between Candlemas and Candelaria. Those are the names for our Catholic friends and ancestors, but that's what's up. We have from our Norse friends and ancestors on the second, Bari, which we will get into just a little bit more here in a second. And then moving on to the next day, Monday, February 3rd, we do have a little bit of astrology happening on this day. First off, we have Mars retrograde squaring Chiron at 19 degrees of Aries. Mars is in Cancer, Chiron is in Aries. We have Venus entering Aries on this same day. And on this same day, we have Mercury trining Jupiter retrograde. Let me look at my notes and see if there's anything else. No, that's everything. Okay, So first of all, um, let's talk about the cool parts of this. Mercury trining Jupiter retrograde. This is a fantastic time for putting a message out to the universe. Again, as I mentioned previously in the podcast, this is a really great week for doing some broad minded philosophical journaling, some let me write my wishes down and put my petitions out to my gods, guides, and guardians, my ancestors, my beings that are assisting me. Like, this is a really great week for intellectualizing that stuff, putting things into words, whether you're thinking them, you're saying them out loud, or you're writing them down. This Mercury trine Jupiter, super helpful in all of that stuff. And again, as we talked about before, Jupiter retrograde, yes, in the sign of its detriment, so it might be toned down a little bit. And where Jupiter might want to go overboard and include every last thing, it might be a little more refined right now. That might be how you are experiencing this Jupiter retrograde, maybe, which is just about to end, but we'll get to that. But just a great time for putting it out there and seeing what happens. Okay, that's the cool part. the not as cool part, Venus stepping into Aries and Mars squaring Chiron. Venus stepping into Aries, it's not the worst thing in the world, but Venus is in detriment in the sign of Aries. It doesn't really want to be there. Aries doesn't really want Venus there. It's kind of like, if you have a significant other and they have their quote unquote cave, their gender cave, whatever, their man cave, their lady cave, their whatever, right? And the idea behind that space is like, it's a totally different vibe from the rest of the house, right? And then the other partner goes in and is like, Venus wants to relax, lay back, enjoy, let things come to them, right? The Venusian parts of us are perpetually on a chase lounge, eating bonbons and waiting for the world to come to them. And it will eventually, right? It's covered in chiffon and delicious perfumes, and everything is luscious and wonderful for Venus. The Venusian parts of ourselves are like all about that. The Aries portions of us are hot, fiery, dry, impatient, potentially angry, or at least excited about fighting about something. Wanted to do it 5 minutes ago, and the Aries portions of us are very similar to the Mars portions of us, which are very driven to go out into the world and get the thing that we want. Venus, sitting back, hanging out on the couch, waiting for the thing to come to us. Aries, impatient to go out into the world and do the thing. So you can see the conflict, right? Venus parts of us want to lay back and let it happen, and the Aries portions of us are like, nope, I want to instigate it and initiate it and go do it myself. So Venus, sometimes the Venusian parts of us sometimes can feel a little awkward or rushed or weirded out as they're moving through. So that's one of the things that's happening on this day. Venus is going to hang out in Aries for like a month-ish, give or take. It's not there forever. But also on this day, Mars, the ruling planet of Aries, who is currently retrograde in the sign of Cancer, where it really does not want to be, not having a good time in Cancer, squares Chiron at 19 degrees of Aries, the sign it wants to be ruling, the sign that Venus has just entered. So now Mars is in a sign it doesn't want to be in. Somebody has just moved into their house that they don't want in their house, and they're square Chiron, who's also in their house. And Chiron, all Chiron wants to do is talk about horrible, painful stuff that's happened in the past. So who's not having a good time here? Mars. Mars is the one not having a good time. So the Mars portions of us, the portions of us that are driven, that are passionate, that are like, I'm ready to fight for that thing. I'm ready to sweat for it. I'm ready to defend. I'm ready to be offensive about it, might be functioning in a really passive-aggressive way this day as Venus comes along and wants to put like lace doilies on everything, and Chiron wants to sit down and have like a cry fest about pain and wounding and painful experiences that have happened in the past. So if you feel like having a big old tantrum on this day, I don't blame you. I also am not saying that's the most or least effective way of dealing with things. It might really work out for you, but also it might not. And so, what might be the more mature thing is, can you give yourself some time and space to have a tantrum somewhere where you're not somebody else's problem, right? I'm a big fan of laying down on the floor and crying and kicking my feet every now and then, or daily, whatever. But like, don't judge me. But we all have our methods, okay? We all have our methods. Some people shop, some people tantrum. But what I'm saying is, I find it to be very powerful and very healthy, and freeing and empowering to allow those portions of myself to have a moment, to have their freak out. I'm not necessarily going to act on anything that comes up during my tantrum, but I do want to give myself the space to feel my feelings and to acknowledge to myself, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. This is funky. It hurts. It's weird. Yuck. I don't want to do this. And now here I'm going to go ahead and go and do it because it's got to get done. But I just wanted to have a moment of acknowledging I don't want to and I don't like it. We know that the work that we do with Chiron often hurts, and it often is assisting us in understanding our holistic situation, the totality of the situation that we're in, the complete picture of the thing. And seeing the complete picture of stuff hurts sometimes. But we gain wisdom from that, and we have the choice to share that wisdom with folks in the future. Today might not be the day. You might not be in a good place for sharing anything. Other people might not be in a place of hearing it. But it is a day where there could be some fussy vibes. Just give yourself a little extra space and time. If you need to, like, walk around the street or walk around the block or go yell at a tree for a second or lay down on the floor and have a tantrum or whatever, just find the right place for yourself to have your meltdown and then your freak out, and then back to the action. It's going to be super great. I'm sure of it. Okay. Moving to February 4th. This is Tuesday, February 4th. It's the last day of our lunar week. And our astrology for this day, Jupiter stations direct at 11 degrees of Gemini. So if you have anything at or around 11 degrees of any of the mutable signs or any of the air signs, this could be a pretty cool day for you. Jupiter stationing direct, I find to often be a very lucky day. This is, again, I think, a great day. And this is me, right? I'm a Sagittarius, so I'm like, you guys, Jupiter. Other astrologers might not flip out so much about Jupiter just stationing direct or stationing retrograde, whatever. But if this is the kind of day that's like, if you've been waiting on a check in the mail, it might show up on this day late. Finally it's here. Or if you've been waiting to hear word on a financial situation or a situation that is going to improve your life in some kind of measurable way, and you've been like, TikTok, where is this message? Why haven't I gotten that email? Why hasn't that person gotten back to me with that phone call? That might happen on this day or in the day following. If you've been having a hard time making money, I know a lot of folks out there have seen their businesses drying up over the last few months. That may begin to reverse itself, and you might start to get a couple more clients and a couple more clients and a couple more clients, and that engine begins to pick up speed again. I can't guarantee that. I hope it to be true for every one of us. But the gears of abundance, the gears of fortune begin to crank forward again on this day. So, could be cool. Again, Jupiter's in Gemini, sign of its detriment, not exactly excited to be there. And the things that have been not great about its transit through this sign may start to come back and ramp up again because it's not retrograde anymore. So, Look, I'm trying to spin this. You got to work with me. All right, that is the astrology for the week. So, I know that I've mentioned just a couple of our holy days here, but many of them kind of fall on this day. We have from our Celtic friends and ancestors Brigantia, as well as King Frost Day. From our Teutonic friends and ancestors, we have Disting, and from our Nordic friends and ancestors, we have Dieseblot. Now, all of these holidays, for me, all echo each other. They are similar to each other, and they all fall under the auspices of our Imbolc stuff. Is this the only thing that's happening right now? No. Throughout the Asian world, we have festivals like Lee Chun, which is the start of spring. We have the Chiang Mai Flower Festival from Thailand, etc., etc. Like, when this new lunar year kicks off, for a lot of folks in Asia, it also, and Southeast Asia, I should say, it also kicks off a whole bevy of springtime flower festivals. And it's either that it's a springtime festival, even though, yes, it's still technically winter. Astronomically, scientifically, we are still in winter. This is sort of the like, yep, we're shutting it down over the next few weeks, and the Earth is going to start to come back to life. For a lot of us around the planet, even though the ground is still frozen, we do have cherry blossom trees and almond blossom trees and other orchards like that will absolutely flower during February and March before spring equinox. It is absolutely beautiful if you live in the Pacific Northwest and you have an opportunity to hang out in the UW courtyard, the University of Washington courtyard, with their dozens and dozens of cherry blossom trees. It is phenomenal. It is totally worth it. 100% believe the hype. It is very, very cool. But if you have cherry blossoms near you, go see them. Go be around that stuff. It's very cool. Okay, let me get off on all of that, because these holidays that I actually want to focus on are Disting, Dieseblot, King Frost Day, Brigantia, etc. These for me are all connected to Imbolc season. And I'm going to read a little bit from Wikipedia. I'm going to riff on some stuff. I'm going to read a little bit from the book, The Nordic Animist Year by Rune Harjo Rasmussen. I've talked about this book before on this podcast. I'm a big fan of it. I love it. Love the work that he's done here. But I want to riff on my own stuff too, of like things that have come up for me over the years of working this material. And I do talk about this in greater length, again, in the classes that are on YouTube. But part of what we're seeing here, a holiday like Brigantia, for example, is directly connected to Brigid. And that is either Saint Brigid or the goddess Brigid. Brigantia is where the word comes from, her name. The word Britain comes from Brigantia, which comes from Brigid. So Brigid literally gives her name to that country and that region of the world. Brigid is an amazing goddess. She is a fiery, dope goddess. But there are other really cool goddesses that we can work with at this time of year. Saraswati is another a Hindu goddess who comes up at this time of year. For me, she makes a lot of sense because of she's so intellectual. So she jives with that Aquarius energy, but she is very much dedicated to crafts and learning and the trading of skill sets and craftsmanship, which very much links into our Imbolc symbolism and Brigid symbolism. Brigid is an incredible blacksmith or metalsmith, but she is also an incredible poet. And very much a skilled laborer and craftsperson, and oversees the exchanging of skill sets between people. So there's a whole lot here about smarts. There's a whole lot here about information being passed back and forth. Okay, so these other couple of holidays, Disting from our Teutonic friends and ancestors, and Dieseblot from our Nordic friends and ancestors. Very quickly, I'm going to read just like the teeniest little bit off of Wikipedia, and then I'm going to riff on this stuff. So the Disting is an annual market, this is from Wikipedia, which has been held in Sweden since prehistoric times. The old name, Disaping or Disapfing thing, Disa thing, originally referred to the great assembly called the Thing of all Swedes, and it is derived from the fact that both the market and the thing, yes, I'm literally saying thing, were held in conjunction with the Dieseblatt. Okay. These great blots, which are sacrifices, blot connecting to the word blood, generally speaking, these great blots were held for female powers called the Disir, and they include the Norns and the Valkyries, and these were held at a temple. Now, dating this, a lot of this is dated to the end of February or the beginning of early March, and we see that dating happening in a couple of different places. So, but there is a connection here to Candlemas, which is generally going to be held here at the beginning of February. So there's potentially some kind of movement back and forth with this. In 1611, this is again still from Wikipedia, the first play in the Swedish language named Disa was enacted at the Disting, showing a late medieval legend explaining the origins of the Disting as the pagan origins had been forgotten. Instead of being held in honor of female powers, it was held in honor of a heroic girl who prevailed on the king and the assembly to stop a great massacre of the weak and elderly, to hinder overpopulation, etc., etc., right? So who knows what that's all about, but there's some interesting traces even in that. Let's pause and think about one of our Imbolc traditions that we do is that either the mother of the house, the adult woman of the house, leads the ritual, or oftentimes it is young women that lead the rituals in the house. And there absolutely is an element in Imbolc season of the past and those who have died over winter, and have their spirits been settled? Are the ancestors being attended to? And the ancestor element is something that does not necessarily come about at Imbolc itself, like the 1st, 2nd of February, but as we move through the month of February, aka Februa in the Roman calendar, we have a whole bunch of restless dead attendants to the ancestors' festivals and moments and points on the calendar that will come up for us throughout the month of February. So there's pieces of this stuff in here, right? Okay. So there was a mention of another holiday called Dieseblatt. The Dieseblatt, this is again from Wikipedia, was the blot or sacrificial holiday which was held in honor of the female spirits or deities called the Disir and the Valkyries. So this includes the Valkyries, it includes the Norns, but it's important to note that the language here is saying the Disir include the Norns and the Valkyries, which means that the Disir also include somebody else. They include some other female powers or goddesses of some kind. So this is from prehistoric times until the Christianizing of Scandinavia. Its purpose was to enhance the coming harvest. That's interesting. Okay. It is mentioned in the Heverar saga, and a few other sagas. The celebration still lives on in the form of an annual fair called the Disting, which we just learned about. Now, the Dieseblatt appears to have been held during the winter nights or at the vernal equinox. Now, the winter nights connects to January stuff and February stuff. There is a description of a sacrifice being performed. There is something about the daughter of a king perhaps being involved in this storyline. But it suggests that the rite was performed by women, especially in light of what is generally believed to be their nearly exclusive role as the priestesses of the pagan Germanic religion, the Teutonic religion, etc., etc., etc. There's more information. Again, Wikipedia. The Scandinavian Dieseblatt is associated with the Anglo-Saxon Modrenacht, which means Mother's Night. The Anglo-Saxon month roughly equivalent to November was called Blotmonath. Now that's important because in other sources I have found that there is, wait, in fact I think it's the animist year. before I go off on that, let me actually check what he has to say about this. I know that there was something I wanted to quote from this book. Yes, his conversation around Candlemas that he has in, as I said, this is from the book The Nordic Animist Year by Rune Rasmussen. Candlemas, Candlenaut, etc., etc., lavish feasts, dense with divination for weather and fertility rituals, such as beating the fruit trees with branches. Sacred cakes were eaten, and the sacred cake specifically is called the Hell Horse, baked on the evening of Yule, which finalizes the wild hunt period. Let's put a pin in that piece. In Sweden, Candlemas Day became the Disthing, named after the female deities, the Disir, possibly associated with the goddess Freya. This was the Disthing moon, the time of sacrificial festivals. And I know that there's something else in here that I wanted to say. The Hell Horse offering is comparable to the more literal Danish sacrifice of a hell horse on the threshold of darkness, aka All Hallows Eve. This might also relate to the theme of purification, the idea that the dangerously sacred Yule period had to be ended by some sort of purification is particularly important in midwinter month. Again, from the Nordic Animist Year. So collectively what we're looking at here is this holiday that perhaps is a bookend to Samhain. So we have Samhain, aka All Hallows Eve, that sort of kicks off the heart of the underworld journey for the sun and humans in the Northern Hemisphere. The depth of it being Yule, and then as we come out the other side, the other bookend or the other gate that we pass through would be here at Imbolc, Olmec, Disthing, Disablot. But another trip for me in that is this word Disir, which connects for me, for reasons, to the ideas of a distaff, which is a staff that women would hold with a giant ball of flax up at the top, or, unspun flax, unspun wool. And then that wool would be threaded out and spun to then be used in all of the other stuff that we're doing around the world. Connect this back to the symbol towards the beginning of our podcast, where I'm talking about us having our small piece of the tapestry that is ours to tend. And that thread starts somewhere and it ends beyond us, and it's just ours to stitch with in this moment. Well, here, potentially for me, is a festival that speaks to these powerful, perhaps very abstract, beyond the understanding of mortal man, female powers that represent the unspun wool of the universe. This taps deeply in with our crone imagery that we're working with. And, as an aside, when we look at illustrations of people working with distaffs, they hold the distaff up above one shoulder and then they stretch their arm out where the string is spinning towards the spindle on the other. And I can't help but see somebody holding a giant jug on their shoulder and the water pouring out. Okay. These deities or entities, the Disir, again, we know that they include the Valkyries and the Norse, but are not probably made up of only those two groups. I think were frightening because they were abstract and potentially, maybe frightening isn't the right word, but they may have been sort of the embodiments of wisdom, the embodiments of the chaotic, not understandable pieces of this portion of the wheel that we pass through. I talk about a lot of this symbolism again in previous Imbolc classes, as well in some of my Yule classes, of connecting this idea together of the very abstract entity that is the crone at this time of year. And here she's just sort of gathering the wool of the universe and spinning it into these raw threads here at the very beginning of the solar cycle, that we're then going to take up and weave into who knows what as this year goes by. That's where my mind goes with all of this stuff. The Disa or the Dizir deserve a lot more to be said about them, but there's just no time, my friends. There's no time. But it is one of my favorite collections of stuff to think about. It's just literally gathering up the universe as raw wool and spinning it out into the spindle that then is going to be used to make stuff and tie things together and do all the things that we're going to do in the rest of the year. So this is a really great time for doing all of that. And hanging out with those entities and asking for their help and saying, hey, my arms are open. Send some of this raw flax my way. Or, spin me up a spindle worth of thread. Give it to me because I've got a whole bunch of things I want to stitch this year. The other interesting thing about this from an astronomical point of view is basically the 4th, where a lot of these holidays tend to clump up. This would be Old Imbolc. This is going to be in correlation to the sun being about 15 degrees of Aquarius, aka exactly halfway through that process, that sign, that chunk of the year, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, overseeing winter, more or less. These days correspond to the very center of that process, aka about 15 degrees of Aquarius. Just a cool aside, just a thing that probably is just totally a coincidence and totally not connected to anything at all. Ancient, amazing scientists for our ancestors probably never even notice that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff for you to play with. There's a whole bunch of imagery and ideas for you to play with. So we are going to wrap it up here, but before we do, I want to give you just a few tarot cards to work with to kind of, be your flashcards for all of these amazing things that we've talked about over the course of this podcast. Alrighty. Here are some tarot cards that I recommend for you to put on your altar at this time of year. If you're making an Imbolc altar, cool. I have a boatload of suggestions on my website and on those videos on YouTube. My Imbolc section on my website is huge. I have a ton of articles on there about working with these various holidays, other major holidays that are going to come up during Imbolc season, Groundhog's Day, Lupercalia, etc., etc. A bevy of information, my goddess. Okay, but you know me, I love working with the tarot, and I think of the tarot as these really incredible flashcards that contain so much symbolism for those with eyes to see. The tarot cards that I would work with for this week would be, first and foremost, the Star card. This connects us to the sun traveling through Aquarius, which is, of course, happening right now. We've had a lot of star imagery in our podcast this week. Once again, I'm sure that was just a coincidence, or I was totally casting a spell on you. Wicked. Okay. So hanging out with the star card this week, very, very potent. While the moon is in Aquarius, we can also hang out, and I should say while the sun is in Aquarius, we can also hang out with the Queen of Swords. The queens tend to align us with our fixed signs, swords, air. So Queen of Swords may have some information for you on how to work with Aquarius energy in general. And when the moon is in Aquarius, which is where we have our new moon this week, we are working with the Seven of Swords. And the Seven of Swords is the card that I'm actually going to take a second with, because I've talked about the Star and I've talked about the Queen of Swords. And if you want more information, hit me up and I'm maybe have a class for you to buy or something. I don't know. But the Seven of Swords is a spicy card, and it is a difficult place, even though when we are experiencing it, we might not realize how difficult it is. Because in the Seven of Swords, we're basically learning that we can build reality with our words. So what's stopping us from saying anything? Exactly, right? Yeah. I don't know how you guys are doing, but out there in the world, people are saying some wild shit, right? And they are constructing realities with their words by allowing certain things to be said, by not allowing certain things to be said, by resurrecting language that we collectively decided we weren't using anymore because it's fucking awful, etc., etc., etc. So, in the Seven of Swords, we are in a moment of realizing, oh, I could say anything here. And initially, when we begin that conversation with ourselves, we are approaching it from an intellectual place, an analytical place. But later, morals and ethics and other pesky issues may come into play. So the moment of experiencing the Seven of Swords might feel like, oh, I can just think the world into being. I can think whatever I want to about things. I can hold whatever opinions I want. I can secretly adhere to whatever philosophies I would like to. Sure, totally. But that may bleed out at some point. That may become very apparent that you've been harboring these beliefs, that you've been harboring these philosophical stances. At some point, you may get up on stage and just make an absolute ass of yourself for the entire world to see. Or it may be that you say one thing, but you clearly live your life by a different set of rules. And at some point that becomes apparent to the people around us. Now, that can go in all sorts of different directions, right? That's why I'm being vague in my language on purpose here, because it is an unstructured experience that we're having in the Seven of Swords. It is a moment of figuring out, I can say whatever I want to here. I can believe whatever I want to, and I can tell people that I believe whatever. Like, I can manufacture whatever I want in this moment. What are the ramifications of those choices? That's all we're dealing with. Super fun, right? So tying that all back in together. In the star card, we are tapping into universal, aeons old sources of wisdom and guidance that have been there since the beginning for humanity. We're tapping into those sources, and we're drinking from them. We are stepping into the places where our mind feels like it knows what it's doing, right? We're stepping into the places that feel comfortable in terms of how we think about things and how we talk about things. But we also are wielding our intellect in a very powerful way. And or maybe we are witnessing other people who are able to wield their intellect in really powerful ways. And on the personal level, we're recognizing that how I speak about a thing or how I don't speak about it, or, all of that stuff helps me determine what I think is right or wrong in the world. What is my process around that? How have I been functioning there previously? Have I only been relying on the traditions and the standards and the belief systems and the philosophies that have been handed to me from previous generations? Have I been trying to discover new things for myself? How's all that going for me? Where has there been pitfalls in that? Where have there been places where I've cut my fingers on that process? And where am I learning how to wield my word and wield my mind in the world in a way that is still in alignment with my ethics and still in alignment with what my spirit knows to be universally healthy and true and good and liberating and powerful. That's all. That's our witches' work this week. Just that stuff, right? Lots of pondering, lots of considering, lots of journaling is my big recommend for this week. And that, my friends, is it. That's the podcast. Woo! We made it all the way through. As I have said 100 times, I have videos up on my YouTube channel. I've got a page full of information on my website. Sign up for newsletters. Sign up to my Patreon if you love this shit and you want to support it. Massive thank yous to all of my patrons. You guys are legends, and you're also unhinged. I don't know why you're still here, because you're insane. I love it. It's so good. My books are open now for patrons and for new clients. They've been closed for a couple of months. They are back open again. please sign up and get your shit together for 2025. Get a reading. My God. Lock in, people. Now is the time. We need to lock in and get it figured out. All right, that's it. Blessed be, my good heathens. Here we go into the light.